and we're going to start talking about Google Play Instant. That was announced at GDC, and Google Play Instant is all about an instant gratification. It's about getting the user in your experience as fast as possible. In today's world, you can think like I send a message to my mom and I tell her try out this new game. She opens the link, she goes to the Play Store, she plays the install button, the game starts installing slowly and slowly. Then she forgets about the game. She goes to the oven. There was the dinner cooking. She completely forgets about the game. She never opens the game again. Now, here's the thing. If you think about the abandonment rate, like the number of people who starts installing a game and actually play the game, is the number of people who don't play the game at all, forget about the installation, is very, very high. If you think about the number, it's probably higher than the number you're thinking about now. Now we are tackling this problem here at Google with Google Play Instant, and in this new world, I send a link to my mom. She opens the link, and instead of going to the Play Store, she starts immediately into the game. Like a few seconds, the game starts running, and it's downloading a native application with no installation whatsoever. So there's no more friction there. Now, my mom is playing, she forgets about dinner, and I'm not gonna have dinner tonight. It happened quite a few times, actually. The key points here are the code that is being downloaded for a Google Play Instant application, in game in our case, is native code. There's no JavaScript in their virtual machine. It's native code, and it does have access to almost everything that a normal application has access to, and we're going to see examples. Now Matt from Zynga implemented an instant game, and he's going to talk about their experience.
All right, so hello, my name is Matt Samet. I'm a senior technical manager in Zynga's Strategic Partnerships Group, which basically means that I help manage the relationships with our platform and development partners, such as Google. And here's what I'll be talking about today. So Fran gave you a quick recap of what the platform's all about, but I'll cover why we're on the platform and what really excites us about it. And then I'll show you a quick look of each of the 3 instant games we made, and then I'll kind of cover how we made them and go into a few of the technical details. And then I will talk about some key takeaways and things to remember when you're building your own instant games. And there'll be some time at the end, hopefully, for questions. So this is why we're on the platform. This is what it's all about. There's a huge potential to boost your installs for your game, and to then get your game seen by many more people who may not have seen it or who may not get the opportunity to see it. So, and you can sidestep some of the drop-offs that you see when you acquire users on the Play Store. For example, if you have a really large game, you get that prompt. If you're not on Wi-Fi, you may want to avoid downloading this game on cellular. So all those things, those are friction points. Those are funnel drop-offs. So with Instant, you can really sidestep those. And also, if people aren't ready to commit to downloading your game for whatever reason, maybe they want to try it out. Maybe they don't know what the full experience is going to be. You can give them a trial. So, and in fact, you don't really have to acquire users from the Play Store at all. And that's one of the really exciting things about this platform, is that you can kind of creatively distribute these games on different channels that were unavailable for mobile game distribution previously. So our goals getting started were to build something that allows us to really understand what development and publishing looks like on this new platform. And hopefully we'll see the tangible benefits of actually making these products to our DAU and installs. So that was the main goal. The way we do that is we really focus on getting the user into the instant experience as quickly as possible, and then we show them, how fun the game is right up front. And then when we feel that they've gotten, a good sense of what the full experience is going to be, we try to get them to install the full game from within the instant game. So let's talk about what we built. We started with Zynga Solitaire, which is a super simple solitaire game written in Java with Android Studio. Pretty standard solitaire game, nothing too special. So this was an obvious choice because it was a very simple game, and we wanted to get started with a simple use case for learning the platform. So for Google Play Instant, we were able to fit the entire game into the instant experience, so you can play it instantly. And if you want a new game, we prompt you to install. So pretty straightforward. And this was, a single developer, just me. Took me about 3 days to get started, and about a week after that to have it ready for publishing. So then we wanted to expand a bit with one of our top games, Words with Friends 2. So this is a very popular social word tile game written in Java and C++ with Cocos 2DX. So for Instant, we took the game's solo series ladder, which is the game's single-player experience, and we made that the focus so that players can really get a taste of the full game, what it's all about, just by clicking Try Now. And you play against bots, and we drop you right into the game board right away, and you experience the fun gameplay as quickly as possible. And once you beat a few levels of the solo series, you can install the full game. And the Words with Friends team had 2 engineers working on this for about a total of 4 weeks. So then we really wanted to challenge ourselves and see what can we do on the platform, what's possible. So CSR2 is an immersive 3D street racing game, built in Unity. It's got state-of-the-art graphics, relatively demanding high-fidelity game. And we have a lot of really fine attention to detail. We work directly with the car manufacturers to get extremely detailed car models. So the full game is about 1.3 gigabytes, so fairly significant on the download size. But with Instant, we can ensure we get maximum reach and get players excited before committing to that full download. So what we did was we did a showroom experience, and we're showcasing a single car from the latest downloadable content available in the full game. And you can explore the car in full graphic fidelity. You can spin around the car. You can scale it up and down. It's actually interactive. You can open and close the doors and the hood and generally see what you're going to get in the full game as far as the fidelity goes. We also added AR mode, which is a feature available in the full game. It's powered by AR Core. And this is great for getting really up close and personal with the cars, doing some fun stuff like there's my Lamborghini parked next to my other car. And I put a Lamborghini on my desk inside because why not, right? So let's see how each of these were done. Go into depth here a little bit. But first, let's talk some about the requirements of being on the Google Play Instant platform. So the most significant thing that you're going to have to deal with is that 10 meg initial APK limit. So it can also be the hardest to overcome, right? So which is why it's so important to focus on the absolute core gameplay experience that really captures what the essence of the game is. So you can download as much as you want after the game starts running, but the initial APK that users download has to be under 10 megs. So these experiences run on Android L and above. That's 5.0 and above. If you use OpenGL-ES for any of your graphics, and if you do 3D graphics, if you use GLES, it has to be 2.0. 3.0 is not supported yet. Yeah, not having that thing on the lower left is actually push notifications. They are not available on the platform, so there's no obvious way to re-engage your users. That's why we kind of focus on getting the user into instant, and then as soon as they get a sense for the gameplay, we try to drive them to install as quickly as possible. So you have a few other things like a reduced set of permissions. For example, you can't request external storage permissions, things like that. You need to use HTTPS for all of your network calls. And there's a few Android APIs that are not available, things like getting persistent IDs and stuff like that. Finally, when you build your game, you need to use a relatively recent version of Gradle that supports the instant app structures and features. So this is a little bit about Solitaire. You may or may not be familiar with the diagram on the side, but this comes from the Google Instant Apps documentation. Basically, you have features, which are basically a unit of functionality or gameplay in your game or app. And then you have your instant app module, which depends on features, and you have your regular app module. So you have a unified build that can actually target both platforms, instant and installable. So for Solitaire, we're actually able to refactor the Android Studio project into a simplified version of this diagram. Namely, we were able to fit the entire game into just a single base feature, which is not typical. Usually, well, you wouldn't have your full game available as an instant app usually, but for this one, it turned out to be so small that we could put the entire thing in there. So the game was already relatively small. It's just a standard Solitaire game. So we enabled asset minification and a few other settings, and it fit pretty much right into 8 megabytes. So not too much to worry about there. One of the challenges that I had to overcome when doing this game was upgrading an older Gradle build script, actually a set of older Gradle build scripts to the later Gradle version. And I hadn't had much experience with Gradle before this, and there is a fairly large jump in required changes between the two versions. So just getting familiar with all those changes was really helpful in getting familiar with the required things you have to do to make an instant app, and also helped with our other instant apps that we did after Solitaire. And then when I was ready to submit to the alpha track on the Play console, going through the process was really helpful because it turns out when you submit an instant app, it'll probably tell you some of the things that you might not have done correctly. For example, supporting Android app links and linking your app to your website that you own with a digital asset links file. So getting those kind of, that whole process understood really well was really helpful as well. So, and then Words with Friends was actually relatively easy, which kind of says a lot. Most of the work was specific to the game and to Zynga code, not too many dependencies on the instant app runtime or Android. So that was good. And we didn't really have to optimize it that much, removing some unneeded SDKs, things like that. And when we focused on the core experience, which was that solo series, we got to kind of remove a whole bunch of other parts of the game that contributed a lot to the size, especially with texture atlases and game modes, things like that. And when we removed all those things, it pretty much got us within striking distance of the 10 meg limit. So when we started working on CSR2, this kind of summed up what we were thinking. Not an obvious path from 1.3 gigs down to 10 megs. But the solution was pretty much the same as for our other games, which we wanted to refocus on really the core of the game, what makes the game fun, or the essence of the full game. And this image is pretty accurate. Turns out that we scaled down the game quite extensively, and we ripped out most of it. So originally what we were going to do was a playable race from the tutorial level, but we decided to pare it down because it's not just about the race. It's actually, what makes it fun is all the other things like collecting your cars, customizing them, seeing them in their extreme detail. So a showroom can do that, and it was within our grasp for the initial attempt at this, and that's kind of what we focused on. And we basically removed absolutely everything else from the game, which was quite a lot, and we had a lot of fun doing it as well. We had commit messages that were like, now down to 700 megs, and now down to 400 megs. So we had some fun with it. So a few other things that we had to keep in mind. So the game relied pretty heavily on Android expansion files. These are so-called OBB files. Because your APK can only be 100 megs, I think, or somewhere around there. Obviously, the bulk of it had to be in the expansion files. And because this is all about instant downloads, relatively instant, you can't download several hundred megabytes of data. OBBs are not available on the platform. So turns out that we needed to completely re-architect the way that the game loaded assets, because there's not an expectation of the assets, of the OBB file being there anymore. So it turns out we rewrote the asset loader to load things locally from resources. The game used GLES3 to render the cars. Specifically, it needed a particular GL extension that was more prevalent on devices that supported GLES3. And given that the platform only supports GLES2, this is something we had to think about. We never really got around the issue, just due to lack of time and a few other things, but this was mainly a prototype, so fortunately we didn't have to really worry about it. When building the game, Unity outputs a Gradle project. This Gradle project has no idea what an instant app is, so this is something I believe is being worked on, but don't quote me on it. But for what we had to do here, we had to basically manually modify the Gradle scripts, add basically references to all of the feature targets, the refactoring the modules. This game was relatively involved because it used a lot of third-party libraries, a lot of native libraries. So all of that had to be tied into the Gradle setup. Let's talk about a few things to keep in mind when you're developing your own instant games. So one of the most important things to keep in mind is to keep things focused on the core of what makes your game fun. It really helps with optimizing the size, but it also ensures the user is enjoying the experience right from the get-go. I forgot where, but somebody said that there's like a less than 10-second window from when a user tries a brand new game before they lose interest. So if you don't capture their excitement within that 10 seconds, then they might lose interest. I'm not sure how exactly true that is or how you can verify it, but there is clearly something there that you need to optimize for. So if your game loads data at runtime, might be a good idea to show the user something quickly, to hide that load in the background. If it's not the first level of gameplay, then at least some kind of loading bar or something for the user to see and engage with as they're waiting. And it's always a good idea to test early and often, especially on device and especially across both Android 7 and Android 8, because the Instant App Runtime is actually implemented differently on each of those OS versions, and you can have bugs on one and not the other, so it's important to keep that in mind. And submitting an early build to the Play console under the internal or alpha track will really help because it'll surface errors early. You kind of want to get those under wraps and you want to get them fixed as quickly as possible because you don't want to wait till your game is about to hit production and there's some weird error that gets surfaced to you right as you're trying to submit. And it's always a good idea to write your game in a flexible way. Ideally, you can make it data-driven. This especially applies if you're working on a brand new game. It really helps because it's easier to restructure the app for when you do an instant game because it's usually pretty different product-wise from the full thing. And in our experience, several third-party SDKs were only partially compatible with instant apps. This is a situation that's always improving, and it's probably vastly different from when we started. But it's never a bad idea to check your third-party dependencies. And since nobody likes writing duplicate code, if you can share it with your main app, it's always a good idea. You also get the benefit of free access to any updates made to your main game will just filter down into the instant game. So that's pretty much all I had. Thank you. If you have any questions, happy to answer.
Hi, thanks for the talk. Just wondering if you can, or anyone from Google can share any stats on how that improves the install rate of funnel.
That is unfortunately the only thing I can't talk about. Trying to think of.
I can say it's significant.
Right?
Significant for all the games I worked on. It's not bad.
But you can actually see the stats of installs from the store directly and separated from the ones through instance, right?
Correct.
Yeah, if you look at Google's Developer Day keynote presentation at GDC, I believe they did talk about that a little bit, and they talked about for the early launch partners kind of what lift they all got.
There's also going to be another talk at Google I/O where they're going to share more this information.
Thank you.
You said you stripped out some of the bug reporting architectures. Are you still getting some bug reporting? Are you still getting metrics on users in the instant one?
Yeah, we left one, and turns out there was more than one. Why? I'm not sure.
And are you still able to gather metrics from within the instant player?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. These are, they're standard, or they're pretty much just like normal apps. You can run all those libraries and you get the same data.
So My Samsung Galaxy S8 doesn't show the try now. Any idea why that might be?
For which game?
For Words with Friends too.
I think I know why that is.
Okay.
That's a bug that just surfaced last week. But yeah, it normally does.
So it might show up in another week or so.
If you actually, yes, if you actually send yourself an email to the URL that we used to our games page for Words with Friends, and you click on that link in, for example, your Gmail app or something, it will actually launch the app that way as well. You don't need to be on the Play Store to launch these things. You can actually launch them from anywhere you can click a link.
Sorry, I just wanted to answer the question quickly. Right now, Instant Game doesn't work on 8.0.0. Your Galaxy S8 is probably 8.0.0 Android version. So you need to wait for an update to 8.1.
Also make sure that instant apps are enabled.
Which they should be by default, I think. Yeah, but it's always good to check.
So with your instant app with Unity, did you actually make a separate app because with sharing the game code and that sort of stuff? Because it was talking about stripping out that many libraries. Did you actually make a separate app for it, or did you do a subset of?
It's an extreme subset. It's basically it's sharing the same code. It's branched, but it outputs like a completely separate APK.
Okay, so you use a different build because I do a lot of shared build systems and that stuff, and so you use a separate build kind of flow for that instant app with Unity.
Right. So yeah, in the game we had an extremely customized build script. And we just kind of extended that for the instant app target.
Oh, sweet, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to understand the connection between the instant app and the app you install later. Like if you want to persist your data, save game data from one to another, what are the mechanisms there?
So on Android 8, it's automatic. It shares the same app container on the device. Mm-hmm. So there's like an API called show install prompt. You call that, and the user clicks install, and the full app gets downloaded and installed. And whatever user data you stored in the instant app container will be available to the main app, just as if it was put there by the game itself. And on Android 7, I believe there's a migration API that you can call.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.